Good evening. I'm going to be tying another fly tonight. I think I'm going to make one that's similar to the very first fly that I posted, which is kind of, I think I called it a daddy long legs, but I've always known of it as like a mosquito hawk. And I think depending on where you're from, that's what it's known as. So the one that I did originally, the video I showed how to tie legs out of a pheasant tail quill, but I used feathers for wings, and I used a foam body. This time I'm going to make the body out of hare's ear, like dubbing, using a dubbing. Excuse me. And then I'll have copper wire involved and a brown hackle, and I will be using the pheasant tail legs again, like I did before. So that's going to be the fly that I tie tonight. I'll call it the mosquito hawk. So let me go ahead and turn this around and get started. Apologize for the camera setup. I don't edit these videos. I just record them and post them. So there's that little bit of time there, where you have to wait for me to get the camera set, and then you have to listen to me yawning. I had a long couple of days. I did take a good nap tonight, but that's beside the point. That is a big old hook. Let me get you a smaller hook. I think that'll work. Okay. So I'm using the hooks from the Eagle Claw set that I got. Eagle Claw hooks, generally, if you buy a pack like this, they either come in this red pack or this blue pack. The blue pack, these hooks have, the blue pack has a straight, my goodness, a straight eye on the hook. Whereas the ones in this pack, the eye bends down, which I usually like better because it lends to a better head on the fly. So out of this pack I think has 4 or 5 different sized hooks in it, and I'm using probably the second or third size today, which might be a little big, but whatever. This should be working. You could tie this as not necessarily a dry fly that sits on top of the water, but it could definitely float on the surface. Typically, to me, a dry fly is one that sits literally on top of the water, like on the surface tension, and just like a live fly. A lot of the spinner type flies are made to float, but they sit dead in the water because they're imitating something that's dead a lot of times. And then, of course, a wet fly is one that sinks or works under. Excuse me, man, or works under the water. I'm sorry if my yawning is making you yawn. My yawning might be making me yawn again. All right. The other things that I'm using, like I said before, I've taken a quill, a pheasant tail quill, and I've tied them into legs. The barbs, I'm going to use those right there. I just tied those because these, when I tied them, the knot is too far from the end for what I'm doing. And these are actually the ones that I tied for that first fly a year ago. But I retied these so the knot is closer to the end, to the points. So I'll be using that for the legs. I've got a piece of copper wire that I took from Christmas tree lights, from old Christmas tree lights. I just stripped off the plastic and cut to the wire, and it works just fine. I've got half of a hare's mask here, and I'll be using this color here, hare's ear. You just pick it off and then roll it onto your thread. And then I've got some new thread here. These things kind of, to me, have a light body. I got a new set of threads on Amazon recently, and I've not tied a fly with the new threads. Well, I tied one, but I didn't do a video of it. The set was only like $13, and I think I got 12, or was it 16 rolls? I thought it was a pretty good deal, because it's not just plain colors. It's a nice set of colors. So it had some colors that I wouldn't think to buy. Got another red, I got another black, a brown, I got a dark gray, which is nice. I got another white. I got another kind of cream color that's a little bit lighter than the other one that I have. And then the rest of these, they just look like regular sewing thread, but they're fly tying thread. So I liked the green and the blue. So I'll be interested to see how those turn out in a fly. So I'm going to go ahead and get this thread put in my holder. So I need to wax this stuff because it's not really twisted thread, which I guess is good and bad. This is, I think, the kind that you can untwist and it'll lay flat on your fly. So it's a pretty simple setup. If you've ever seen this or ever watched any of these videos, this is a bobbin holder. It's got these plastic pieces that hold into the end here, or to the sides, and then it runs through this tube and comes out, and there's a little kind of a ceramic or a really slick plastic piece inside there that keeps that from breaking the thread. So you just clip this on. Easier said than done. There we go. And you clip that on so that it can turn, and then you just take your thread and you run it up into that tube. Sometimes it's easier times than others, but once you get it started, you just, whoop, I missed it. I think the wax stuck. I put some wax on there so that it would be slicker, and then it stuck to my fingers. Let me try that again. So you just run that up a little bit. And then you just suck in on the straw and it pulls the thread through. And then you just get your slack back onto the roll so you don't waste a lot of thread. Right, so I'm going to start off with putting a base layer on, like always. Let me move this out just a touch. Room for my hands there. There we go. Beautiful. Sorry for the sniffles. So you just go up and down a couple of times till you get a good covering on the hook. And the point of this, in case you've never seen this, I always like to explain this in my videos, or all the parts and why, in case it's the first or only video you ever see. So, first of all, this hook is a bait holder. It has two barbs on the top and a barb here, which is normal, but these two are specifically for bait holders. That's not typical for a fly tying hook. So I put this in the vise and clamp it down so it presses those out of the way, so it has a smoother shank. But then I do want the shank to have a roughness to it, so that things, when I tie them on, they actually grab. So you put a layer, and then you just of thread for that, and also to cover the hook so it doesn't shine, so that it looks the color that you want it to be, which is the thread that I've chosen. So I want to run this back towards the front again. And you can see why I need wax for this thread, because it's kind of goes everywhere. So I'm going to get a little bit more wax. I'm going to put some wax on my thumb. This is bow wax from archery. I'm just going to run a little bit on here. That also helps hold the materials that you tie on, in addition to the roughness of the surface there. Okay, next step is the copper wire. I want to put the copper wire on, tie it in first, and I'll just run it up the back a little bit to help build on some of that, the hook's thickness, because those mosquito hawks that I'm tying, this mosquito hawk, those things have a pretty thick body. Sometimes they're a little bit thinner, but some of the, especially the ones around here in California that I've seen, man, you could almost put them on a grill after you like grab them. You could eat them. They're like huge. Not that I would eat them, but they are pretty thick things. So fortunately on this, so this thread is really, as you can see, there's some strings, a lot of strings hanging off, even with the wax that I threw on there. So fortunately I'm using dubbing on this fly, and so all that stuff will blend in. You won't see any of it, but it makes me kind of concerned that this lesser expensive thread is going to be a problem on finer flies if I need something that's real good finish. So I'm taking my wax and running it up the, I'm just going to continue to rub it up the thread here as I work. It's going to be particularly important with the hare's ear. So this is the hare's ear, literally rabbit hair. This is, as you can see, that's the mask of the rabbit. He's quite a fuzzy fellow. I want this thing to be kind of this tan color, which is similar to the color of the, it doesn't look like it here, but in real life it looks the same color as this. This light is kind of making it. Maybe that helps. The thread's got a brownness to it that matches that hair. So I'm just going to start, all you do is just pluck it like that. Kind of pull off a tuft of that hair. And I may need more in a little bit, but then you just take that and spread it out a touch, and then you roll it on. You can do this with a lot of materials. I tied it a little close. Let me undo that some so I can have some room to work. There. And as you twist this, you always want to twist it the same direction. So I'm twisting it kind of, I guess that would be counterclockwise. So I've covered up a section of my thread that's about, this is about 2.5 inches. You can see how it looks, it almost looks like really rough yarn when you get it right and get it on there. And so as you wrap, now I can work my way back to where I was started earlier. Just take a few turns, and all I'm doing is just wrapping, touching turns, and you'll see it build up the body. And you want this to taper, to get larger as it goes towards the front. So sometimes you take turns on top of it itself. Okay, I'm getting to the end of my thread, so I'm going to back that off get a little bit more dubbing. Start with some more wax. Sorry for the sniffles. We were working pretty hard in the store yesterday, this weekend, and kicking up a lot of dust, and then not getting much sleep. So you don't need much more, just a little. But I will use what I put on. Yeah, so with this hare's ear, depending on where you grab it from, some fibers are a little longer than others, and as you wrap them, they stick off like this, which makes for a good fuzzy body. You can rough it up a little bit, make it stand out more, or if you don't like the way it stands out, you can go back and trim the long pieces. But this is good because when you get it wet, air bubbles stick into this, and so makes it look more alive. All right, so I've got this to there. I need some room. I've probably left a little too much room. I could probably come up to here, and I think I'll go ahead and do that. Just a touch more hare's ear. I want to leave room for, I've got a hackle to put on. And some wings. This should be enough. I'll just take these turns there. That's better. Yeah, I just want to leave about a quarter of that length, a quarter to a third, ready to work. So now I'm going to wrap. So I've been wrapping this way. I'm going to wrap opposite way with the wire. And just a little spacing here. This helps protect the dubbing so the fish don't just shred it off the thread. And it also gives it a segmented look, which is nice. It's good to look at for us just because it looks good, but it also maybe helps it resemble the bug that we're trying to imitate. So the only thing I don't like about going backwards with the wire is that it's hard to tie in a little bit because it's going off. Anyway, when you do it the regular way or the same way you do the string, then you can cross it. And anyway, it's kind of hard to explain, but that's the way you're supposed to do it so that it goes across the wrapping. So now to the pheasant tail legs. So I've taken these and tied them. My very first video that I did, I posted, the first half of the video was me showing how to, or maybe just the first half was tying the fly and the second half was making the legs. Whatever it was. You can go to that first video. I have a very long beard in that video. And the format's a little bit different than it is now. I didn't have the green background. I think I might have used yellow or maybe the white door behind me. So that was kind of odd. But it was what it was. And kind of got my way of doing things. So this is 6 sets of legs, because that's what bugs have that aren't spiders. And I'm going to put put this so that there's 3 on either side. Just bind around. So the one thing about this is that it's 2 barbs for each leg. So I could come in and separate the points. And snip off so that it's a single one. But I'm not going to bother with that because it just looks more leggy this way. And then you can, of course, pull them and twist them and bend them and make them splay out a little bit more, so when they hit the water they make more of an impression to the fish and to the water itself. And I want to use my thumbnail here to kind of roll this around so they kind of stay on the sides. And then I want to pull my kind of stumps here, pull these back, trim them off. And then I'm going to do the wings next. It'll be a little bit covered up, but that's okay. So I've got these gray feathers. I used these on one of my mayfly patterns, and I was really impressed with how these wings turned out. I liked them. So these things have pretty long wings. I'm just going to snip off a piece here. That'll be about that long. I've got 2 of them, so I'm going to match those up. Some people will use these and they will paint them with nail polish or some kind of coating to make them stay all together like actual wings. I think the fuzziness is fine, and once they get wet they usually don't spread out like that. So I think that length is pretty good. I'll do one at one angle. If I just hold it at the angle as I'm twisting it, so it's kind of funky. So it's hanging off towards me. I'll make the other one, just make sure the other one goes the other way, so they spread out and look like actual wings. I've got a little bit of a butt section here. It's covering up that eye of the hook. Just trim that back some. That's good. Tie that down. Make sure it's nice and smooth. And then I'm going to get my hackle. A little brown hackle, kind of ties in with the body color. I'm not going to use very much, just enough to give it something that I could actually leave it like that if I wanted to. Let me show you. So you can see that it looks very much like a mosquito hawk, especially if we splay these things out some. If you've ever had a pool or been in a creek, you see these things end up in the water. That's pretty much what they look like when they're done. So, but I'm going to go ahead and put this in just to give it a little bit more life, a little bit more action in the water, help it move the water some. So I just take my feather, it's a smaller one, and I pull back on the barbs so they stand up, and I go back here and take some of this off just to have good section to hold on to. But down here is where I'm going to work. I'm going to snip this, square it off before I tie it in so that it's not so hard to snip off afterwards. And hopefully my scissors aren't too dull to cut a stinking feather. But sometimes they are. Sometimes the feather just bounces out and does whatever it wants to do. But I'm not bitter. Let me get some more wax on here. This stuff's a little bit slick. Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about this thread, although it is tying the fly just fine. It's not ideal, but it was cheap. I got 16 pieces for what I would have gotten maybe 3 otherwise. So I pull these back. You kind of fold it in half as you wrap it, and it'll stand up. And this is a small enough hackle. I'm going to use all of this just to give it a little bit of fuzziness around where the head is. And this, my friends, is what hackle pliers are for. With that, I'll call it right there. Get 2 turns to hold it. Snip that off. A little bit of a head. And then I'm just going to use my whip finisher. But first, a half hitch, just to make sure it's secure before I start doing this. And then just take this. 1, 2, 3, do 5 turns. We'll say that head is a little bit big for the kind of fly that it is. Probably should have took less turns, but at this point it is what it is. I'm not going to waste the time to go back and retie it so that there's less there. And then the next problem is, so I'm using nail polish, clear nail polish to finish the head. But my nail polish, I left the lid off of it. And it got a little bit goopy. All right. There's the finished fly. There's a lot of fish in the water that'll eat that. So, it takes a little bit of effort, but it's pretty cool to fish with. So give it a shot. This hook might be a little bit big. That's okay. If it's not okay, you tie another one with a smaller hook. Anyway, there's my mosquito hawk. Hope you liked it. I would say this is my updated mosquito hawk. My Hare's ear mosquito hawk. Hope you enjoyed it. Pretty fun to tie. It's fun to get feathers and make things look like another animal, another creature. So, have a good night.